just finishing up legislative language to encapsulate all the agreements that we've come to. All of the major issues, all of those have largely been agreed to.
That was Senator Bob Menendez on Wednesday's Daily Rundown, saying the so-called Gang of Eight in the Senate is very close to finishing their deal on immigration. They're literally writing the legislative language. That news came on the same day that tens of thousands of people gathered on Capitol Hill to push Congress to act. So joining me now are two members of the House who are working on this issue, Illinois Democrat Luis Gutierrez and Florida Republican Mario Diaz-Balart. Welcome to both of you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Todd.
Thank you. Congressman Gutierrez, let me start with you. What you're hearing coming out of the Senate, are you going to be able to support something like this that has this, what you're hearing, the metrics of having a sort of a border security metrics that has to be met before the path to citizenship begins?
Look, I've had it explained to me by Senator Schumer and Senator Bennett and my own Senator Durbin. And Bob Menendez has been doing this. Menendez has been doing this for decades. He understands. They have convinced me that what they have agreed to is a path that is reachable, to American citizenship. But most importantly, they are going to protect 11 million people from deportation, give them work authorization, learn English, pay your taxes, get a background check, and make them right with the law. And I know Mario and I, as we look at this, we think of those families. 1,400 people will be deported today, 1,400 tomorrow. Even if we finish this, Todd, by the end of, let's just hope and pray that in July the president signs this legislation. Another 125,000 people will be deported, and tens of thousands of families will be affected.
Congressman Diaz-Balart, the most fascinating thing we found in our poll is that among members of your party, when you do not talk about the penalties that those that are here that are undocumented would have to go through to get citizenship, a majority of Republicans are not in favor. But then when you tell them that the bill will have, that you'll have to pay a fine, you have to learn English, there'll be a background check, then suddenly support grows to 73% among Republicans. How do you essentially prevent the messaging from getting out of whack, because that's what destroyed immigration reform's chances 7 years ago?
First place, we have to make sure that we have legislation that is reasonable, that the American people understand and think it makes sense. And that's what we're working on in a bipartisan way. And second place, look, you would think that if there's a bipartisan arrangement between members of the House with all the bickering up here, that most people would say, hey, we may not agree with all of it, but good job. We don't think that's what's going to happen. We think what's going to happen is that all sides are going to be critical. All sides are going to try to kill it, which is why it's important to do this right.
You really believe, let me stop you there. You sound a little more pessimistic. I've had people say I'm overly optimistic of this chances. I think, compared to everything else you guys are working on, that immigration is the best chance of seeing something done in the next 3 or 4 months. But you seem a little nervous.
No, I'm optimistic that we're going to get it done precisely because all the work that's being done. However, I'm a realist. I do not think that just because it's a bipartisan effort, something that's rare up here, that the world is going to say, great job, guys. No, I think both extremes are going to be critical. The important is to stay on the issue, to focus on the issue. We're working on legislation that is reasonable, that protects the rights of those who are in the legal process, who, as my friend and colleague said, who stops the deportations of decent people who have, by the way, in many cases, American kids, fixing an immigration system that's broken, creating a visa program that works.
What Mario is saying, Todd, is that, look, we are going to, Democrats are taking into consideration Republican concerns and priorities, and let me just say at the same time, they are taking. So it's a bipartisan approach. It's a comprehensive immigration bill. So there are going to be parts that are going to be more acceptable, likable to certain sectors of 435 members of the Congress of the United States. But I'm sure once the senators unveil theirs, and we shortly thereafter unveil ours, as I expect we will, I think what you're going to hear is people say, pick and choose different parts. But it's going to be a comprehensive immigration reform bill. And I got to tell you something. The American public on November 6th said, stop picking winners and losers. You know, get together in a bipartisan approach. It's what we want you to do. And that's what Mario and I and a lot of other really good men and women on the Republican and Democratic side are doing on the issue of immigration. The people yesterday that were clamoring for change here in Washington, D.C., they expect no less. They don't expect me to wake up in the morning and fight with Mario and that's the challenge of the day. They expect me to sit down with Mario and find 218 votes, Republican and Democratic,
now, but let me ask you about that. Does this realistically, does this have to get through the Senate first before the House takes it up?
I don't think so,
I think we have our own process. I mean, in the House, we've been working for a long, long time, and we think that we have a very good piece of legislation that we hopefully will be able to unveil shortly. A piece of legislation that's good, that's reasonable, that's permanent, that fixes what's broken, and that does so in a way that we can get the 218 votes in the House.
Yeah, let me steal an expression from Mario. We're on the same planet. That is to say that the way in which the Senate has explained to me and others that they're going to manage the key and principal issues around comprehensive immigration reform are going to be somewhat similar and somewhat in sync with our approach. But the approaches will be different. You will see different things treated differently because we are not. It's not a group of 16. It's a group of 8. The House of Representatives has different considerations than the Senate does, and we need to get 218 votes. But that's our goal.
But I think
before I go,
if the purpose is to fix it, you're going to reach relatively similar conclusions. If that's your approach, to fix what's broken,
Congressman,
we'll have differences, but they'll be very similar.
Diaz-Balart, Congressman Diaz, I want to ask you one quick political question. Greg Walden, chairman of the NRCC, was very critical of the president's budget on the issue of Social Security and those changes on the cost of living increases, and seemed to use some rhetoric that some Republicans are uncomfortable with. Do you agree with Congressman Walden about about his critique of the president's budget on Social Security?
I frankly haven't seen it, and to tell you the truth, I haven't finalized reading the president's budget. There are things in that budget which I obviously am not going to like. I'm hoping there's some things that we can get together and start working on, but I frankly have not seen the comments of Mr. Walden or others, and I haven't finished reading.
There is a widespread concern in the Democratic caucus here in the House of Representatives with the president's proposal, and so I will share that. Maybe Mario and I, we've been locked up in a room with our staff trying to get this done. So excuse us if we don't know if we're not up to date on everything.
Right. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you for helping us kick off what we're doing all day today on this push on immigration reform. Thanks for your work. Thanks for coming on the show.
Great pleasure.
Up next, resisting reform. Our poll shows a strong majority now support a path to citizenship. But there are some grassroots groups trying to squash any effort at reform. Next, we're going to look into the money and the methods behind some of the opposition. But first, today's trivia question. In how many states are at least 15% of the population foreign-born? First person to tweet me the correct answer at Chuck Todd and to tweet the show at Daily Rundown gets the on-air shout-out. The answer and more is coming up on the Daily Rundown. We'll be right back.